A morning like any other. The Ironveil Palace was quiet before sunrise. That was the hour Lena Caldwell loved most. The long marble corridors were empty, the chandeliers still dimmed, and the whole enormous building breathed like a sleeping giant. She could walk from the records hall to the East Archive and back without passing a single soul. No whispers, no sideways glances, no one reminding her with their eyes that she was the only latent wolf employed in the royal palace. Latent. The word had followed her like a shadow since she was 16. Born with the gene, born inside a pack family, but without the shift. No wolf form, no heightened senses, no place at the communal hunt table. Just Lena, 5'3", ink-stained fingers, and a memory sharp enough to catalogue every treaty signed in the last 200 years. She had earned this job. That was something no one could take from her. She pushed her cart of archival folders down the corridor that connected the East Wing to the Royal Administrative Hall. The wheels squeaked softly on the stone floor. She had been asking maintenance to oil those wheels for 3 weeks. They had not yet arrived. The box that changed everything. The Royal Administrative Hall was a grand space lined with tall dark wood panels and portraits of every Alpha King in Ironveil history. At the very center of the hall, positioned between the 2 main pillars, stood the golden mailbox. It was not an ordinary mailbox. Every pack member who passed it was required to stop, place a hand over their chest, and bow their head for 3 full seconds. It was a sign of loyalty to the crown, a tradition so old that no one alive remembered who had started it. The box was polished every morning by a dedicated attendant. It smelled faintly of cedar oil and something metallic, like coins warmed in a closed fist. Lena had bowed to it every single morning for 2 years without thinking twice. But this particular morning, her cartwheel caught in a groove between 2 floor stones. She stopped, crouched down, and wrestled the wheel free with both hands. By the time she stood up, brushed dust from her navy skirt, and grabbed her cart handle, she had already rolled past the golden box by a good 4 steps. She did not realize it until she reached the archive door. She turned back to look. The box gleamed under the corridor light. 3 seconds, that was all it required. She almost turned back. But the archive door was already unlocked, her folders were heavy, and her shift started in 4 minutes. She told herself she would bow twice tomorrow to make up for it. She went inside. The summons. The note arrived at Lena's desk at exactly 9 in the morning. It was not slipped under her door or sent through palace mail. It was carried by Finn, the young palace guard with the unfortunate habit of looking apologetic about everything. "I'm really sorry," Finn said, holding out the small sealed card with both hands as though it were a live animal. Lena looked at the black wax seal pressed into the card. The Ironveil crest. A wolf mid-leap with a crown above it. "The king," she said flatly. "The king," Finn confirmed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The security camera in the administrative hall runs 24 hours. The morning attendant reviewed the footage during the box polishing. Apparently it flagged an anomaly." Lena stared at the card for a long moment. "An anomaly," she repeated. "You didn't bow." She broke the seal and read the single line of text inside. "Present yourself to the throne room before noon. DV. Standing before the storm." The throne room of Ironveil Palace was designed to make visitors feel small. The ceilings were cathedral high, the floors cold and pale as bone, and the throne itself was carved from a single piece of obsidian, dark and almost purple in certain lights. It sat on a raised platform at the far end of the room, which meant anyone who entered had a very long walk during which they could contemplate every mistake they had ever made. Lena made that walk at 11:47. The room was not empty. Elder Broderick stood to the right of the platform, his arms folded, his thin mouth curved in a small, satisfied smile. 2 other senior officials stood behind him. Lady Celeste was there too, positioned near the left pillar, wearing a dress the color of winter roses, watching Lena's approach with barely disguised amusement. And then there was King Darian Voss. He was seated in the throne, one leg crossed over the other, an open book resting face down on the armrest as though she had interrupted his reading. He was younger looking than his portraits suggested. The portraits always emphasized the crown, the formal collar, the ceremonial armor. In person, he wore a simple dark shirt, the sleeves rolled to his forearms, a leather-bound ledger on the seat beside him. His hair was dark brown and slightly overgrown, and his eyes, when they lifted to look at her, were the color of deep amber lit from behind. Those eyes did not look like the eyes of a man who made small problems out of big ones. Lena stopped at the correct distance, placed her hand over her chest, and bowed her head for 3 full seconds, the way she should have done that morning. When she straightened, Darian was still watching her. The warning that froze the room. "You walked past the loyalty box this morning," he said. His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that did not need to rise to fill a room. "I did," Lena said. "My cartwheel was stuck. I miscounted my steps." "That is not an explanation," Elder Broderick cut in sharply. "That is an excuse. The tradition requires." "I was speaking to her," Darian said, without looking at Broderick. Broderick closed his mouth. Darian rose from the throne slowly. He descended the platform steps with a calm that felt more dangerous than any display of anger would have. He stopped several feet from Lena and studied her the way a person reads a sentence they need to understand fully before moving on. "The loyalty box has stood in that hall for 340 years, he said quietly. "Every soul who passes it bows. Servants, advisors, visiting dignitaries, generals. It is not about the box. It is about understanding that in this palace, no one is above the traditions that hold this pack together." He tilted his head slightly. "Do you understand that, Lena Caldwell?" She felt a cold current move through her spine when he said her name. "I understand it," she said steadily. "I also understand that it was an accident, not a statement." Something shifted in his expression. It was small and brief, like a flame catching and being quickly covered. He leaned forward just slightly, close enough that she could catch the scent of him, cedar wood and cold rain and something older underneath. "Let me be very clear," he murmured, low enough that Broderick and Celeste and the officials would have to strain to hear. "If it happens again, accident or statement, I will personally ensure that your position in this palace becomes significantly more complicated." The room was absolutely silent. "Do we understand each other?" he asked. "Yes," Lena whispered. But even as she said it, she could not look away from his eyes. And King Darian Voss, the coldest man in the Ironveil kingdom, did not look away from hers either. He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he turned, walked back up the platform steps, and picked up his book. "Dismissed," he said. Lena turned and walked back across the cold pale floor. Her steps were steady. Her hands were shaking. Behind her, she heard the faintest sound. The slow, deliberate turn of a page the morning everything changed. Lena did not sleep well that night. She lay on her narrow bed in the palace staff quarters, staring at the ceiling, replaying the throne room in her mind like a song stuck on repeat. Not the warning itself, though that had certainly been clear enough. It was the 3 seconds afterward. The way Darian Voss had held her gaze before turning away. The way the room had been so completely silent that she had heard her own heartbeat. She had received warnings before. Her old supervisor at the regional records office had warned her about filing deadlines. Her landlord had warned her about the noise curfew. Warnings were ordinary things that ordinary people received and moved past. This had not felt ordinary. By 6 in the morning she had given up on sleep entirely, dressed in her pressed navy uniform, pinned her dark hair back, and was already at her records desk with a cup of tea going cold beside her when Finn appeared in her doorway looking apologetic again. "Another card?" Lena asked without looking up. "A document," Finn said carefully. "Official palace letterhead. Signed and sealed." This time the seal was not black. It was deep gold. Lena opened it slowly. Effective immediately, Lena Caldwell of the Palace Records Division is placed under Royal Observation Order for a period of 14 days. She is required to report to the King's Private Administrative Wing each morning at 8 o'clock for duty assignment. This order is non-negotiable and non-transferable. Office of the Alpha King, Ironveil Palace. Lena read it twice. Then she set it down on her desk, took a long sip of cold tea, and looked at Finn. 14 days, she said. "I really am sorry," Finn said. The private wing. The King's Private Administrative Wing was nothing like the grand public spaces of the palace. There were no towering ceilings or ceremonial portraits here. The hallways were narrower, lined with bookshelves that ran floor to ceiling, stuffed with leather-bound volumes and rolled maps and stacked folders tied with dark ribbon. It smelled of old paper and lamp oil and something quietly alive, like a library that had been breathing for centuries. Lena arrived at exactly 8 o'clock on the first morning. A senior attendant named Hara, a small precise woman with silver-streaked hair and the expression of someone who had seen everything twice, met Lena at the wing entrance and handed her a folded list without greeting. "Your assignments for today," Hara said. "Correspondence sorting, cross-referencing the Eastern border treaties from the last decade, and cataloguing the incoming diplomatic packages by region and priority. The king reviews your completed work at 5. "Does he want me to present it in person?" Lena asked. "He wants it done correctly," Hara said. "Whether or not he sees you depends on whether or not he chooses to." She turned and walked away, heels clicking softly on the stone floor. Lena unfolded the list. It was detailed, precise, and would take most of the day. She found the small desk assigned to her at the end of the corridor, outside the king's personal office, set down her bag, and got to work. What she noticed. Over the first 3 days, Lena noticed things. She noticed that Darian Voss worked longer hours than anyone she had ever observed. She would arrive at 8 and he was already in his office. She would finish her assignments at 5 and see the warm line of lamplight still glowing under his door. Hara confirmed, with characteristic bluntness, that the king rarely retired before midnight. She noticed that he took his tea without sugar, always at 9:30, always in the same dark blue cup that Hara brought without being asked. She noticed that he preferred silence over background noise, that he never played music, that his office had no unnecessary decorations except for a single small painting on the wall beside the window that she could not see clearly from her desk. She noticed that on the second morning, a stack of particularly old and damaged treaty documents appeared on her desk with a small note that read simply, "These need careful handling." The handwriting was precise and slightly slanted. She recognized it from the royal observation order. He had left them himself. She spent 4 hours carefully transcribing and repairing the damaged sections. When Hara collected her work at 5, she returned 10 minutes later. "The king says your transcription of the Silverbrook Treaty is accurate to the original," Hara reported. "He also says your margin notes are useful." Lena looked up. "He reviewed it already?" "He reviews everything," Hara said simply. Lady Celeste's move. On the 6th day, everything shifted. The royal dinner was a monthly event, formal and attended by the senior council, pack nobility, and visiting representatives. Staff were not invited, but certain palace employees were required to be present in service roles. Lena found herself assigned to the records table near the back of the great dining hall, responsible for managing the official guest registry and correspondence received during the event. She dressed carefully that evening. Her navy uniform was plain but clean. She kept her hair pinned simply and wore no jewelry. She was there to work, not to be noticed. Lady Celeste noticed her anyway. Midway through the first course, Celeste drifted past the records table with 2 of her close companions, all of them dressed in silks that caught the candlelight. She stopped in front of Lena's station and looked at the registry with theatrical curiosity. "Oh," Celeste said brightly, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "They have the latent girl managing the guest list." How progressive, she tilted her head. "Do you even know half the names on this list, sweetheart? Some of these families have histories that go back further than your entire bloodline's recorded existence." Lena kept her eyes on the registry. "I catalogued those histories myself," she said evenly. "I can recite most of them from memory if it would help clarify anything for you." Celeste's smile tightened. "Charming," she said, and turned to her companions. "You see what the king allows in here now? It really does lower the standard of the whole room." What the king did. Lena did not respond. She had learned long ago that responding to that kind of cruelty only fed it. She kept her expression neutral and returned her attention to the registry. Then the room shifted. It was a subtle change at first, a quiet that moved like a ripple from the head table outward. Lena looked up. Darian Voss had risen from his seat. He was not looking at the room in general. He was looking at the records table. At her. He crossed the dining hall with that same unhurried calm he carried everywhere, and the conversations around him stilled one by one like candles being cupped. He stopped in front of Lena's station. Celeste and her companions had not yet moved away. They stood frozen, caught in the moment like insects in amber. Darian looked at the guest registry in Lena's hands. The Ashvale family's treaty documentation, he said quietly. The amendment signed in the 4th year of my grandfather's reign. What were the 3 primary territorial concessions? Lena answered without hesitation. She quoted the concessions, the dates, the names of the signing witnesses, and the disputed clause that had been resolved in the 5th year. Darian listened to every word. Then he looked at Celeste. The look lasted exactly 2 seconds. It contained no anger, no dramatic display. It was simply the look of a man who had already reached a conclusion about something and found it entirely uninteresting. The standard of this room, he said to no one in particular, his voice carrying clearly in the silence, is determined by the quality of the work done in it. He picked up a pen from Lena's station, signed his name in the guest registry, set the pen down, and walked back to his seat. Celeste left the dining hall 11 minutes later. Myra, who had witnessed everything from the kitchen service door, found Lena afterward and gripped both her hands. Lena, she whispered, her eyes enormous. He defended you. He was making a point, Lena said carefully. Yes, Myra agreed. About you. That night, alone in her room, Lena sat on the edge of her bed and thought about amber eyes and cold rain and the quiet, deliberate weight of a man choosing exactly where to place his words. She thought about it for a very long time. What the box was really holding. On the 11th day of her observation order, Lena found the letter. It was buried inside a water-damaged crate of archival materials that had been recovered from the old Ironveil Records vault during a recent renovation. Hara had assigned her to sort and catalogue the crate's contents, most of which were brittle, faded, and roughly 300 years old. Lena worked slowly and carefully, the way she always did with fragile things. The letter was folded inside a larger document, hidden between 2 pages of a land survey from the Old Kingdom period. It was sealed with wax, the seal unbroken, the crest pressed into it one she did not immediately recognize. 2 wolves facing each other, a small crescent moon between them. She turned it over. On the back, written in ink so faded it was nearly invisible, were 4 words. For the one chosen. Lena sat very still for a long moment. Then she carried the letter directly to Hara. The secret the council had buried. Hara's reaction was not what Lena expected. The small, precise woman looked at the letter, looked at the crest, and went completely pale. She told Lena to stay exactly where she was, walked to the king's office door, knocked twice, and went inside. She was in there for 4 minutes. When she came out, her expression had been carefully rearranged into neutrality. "The king will see you now," Hara said. The office was warm, the lamp on his desk burning steadily. Darian was standing when Lena entered, not seated behind his desk but standing near the window, and when she held out the letter he crossed the room and took it from her with a care that told her he already understood its weight. He looked at the crest. Something moved through his face, deep and quick, like weather crossing open water. "Where did you find this?" he asked. She told him. The crate, the land survey, the hidden fold. He broke the seal slowly and read. His expression did not change, but his jaw tightened, and once, briefly, his eyes closed. He set the letter down on his desk and looked at Lena in a way that felt entirely different from every previous look. The assessment was gone. The careful distance was gone. What was left was something unguarded and almost startled, like a man who had searched for something for a very long time and found it in the last place he thought to look. "Your mother's family name," he said. "Before Caldwell. What was it?" Lena blinked. "Ashvale. My grandmother changed it when she married. It was a common spelling variation of Ashvale," Darian repeated softly. He picked up the letter and held it out so she could read it. The language was old but readable. It was a covenant letter, written by the founding Alpha of Ironveil to a family called Ashvale, the pack's first appointed record keepers and the only bloodline outside the royal family trusted with the true history of the territory. The letter described a bond written into the Pack's founding laws, a connection between the Ironveil crown and the Ashveil line, one that could only be recognized when the right two people stood in the same space at the same time. It described the bond using a word Lena had only ever read about in very old texts. Fated. Elder Broderick's hand. Lena sat down slowly in the chair across from Darian's desk without being invited. He did not point this out. Broderick knew, Darian said. It was not a question. If he had access to the vault records, Lena started. He oversees the vault, Darian said flatly. He has overseen it for 20 years. The full shape of it settled over both of them like cold water. Elder Broderick had known about the Ashveil covenant. He had known that Lena's bloodline connected to the crown's founding law. And he had spent years making sure she remained invisible, underestimated, and easy to dismiss. He had tried to have her removed after the mailbox incident. He had placed her in a position where a single mistake could end her employment entirely. He had been afraid of what she might accidentally uncover. And she had uncovered it anyway, because of a stuck cartwheel and a miscounted step. Darian moved to his desk and pressed the communication bell 3 times, the signal that summoned the palace's head of security. I need Broderick's office sealed and his council access suspended pending a full review, he said when the guard appeared. Tonight. The guard looked briefly stunned, then composed himself and left. Lena watched all of this from her chair. What he said when the room was quiet again. When the guard's footsteps had faded down the corridor, the office was very still. The lamp burned. Outside the window, the Ironveil skyline glittered cold and silver in the late evening dark. Darian sat down behind his desk and looked at Lena. Not at the letter. Not at the crest. At her. You have been in this palace for 2 years, he said. Yes, Lena said. And for 2 years, Broderick was on the appointments committee that reviewed your annual position renewal. Yes. He renewed it every year, Darian said slowly, as if working through something. He could have removed you. But he kept you close instead. He wanted to watch me, Lena said. In case I started asking questions. You never asked questions, Darian said. I read, Lena said simply. I didn't need to ask. Something changed in his face then, a slow shift like early light moving across stone. The careful, controlled king who had given her a cold warning in a throne room 11 days ago was still there, but the wall behind his eyes had come down by several degrees, and what was underneath it was quieter and less certain and considerably more human. The loyalty box, he said quietly. Lena waited. It was commissioned by the first Ironveil king as part of the Ashveil covenant, Darian continued. It was placed in the administrative hall as a reminder of the connection between the crown and the bloodline. It was never just a tradition. It was a marker. A symbol of a promise that was supposed to be honored. Lena thought of herself rolling past it with a stuck cartwheel. I ignored the one thing in this palace that was actually connected to me, she said. You didn't know, Darian said. Your warning, Lena said carefully. In the throne room. You said it would make things significantly more complicated. I didn't know either, he said. Not then. But I knew something, he paused. I knew I needed you to stay. The lamp between them flickered once, as though the palace itself had exhaled. The truest thing. Myra had told Lena once, during a late night in the palace kitchen over reheated soup, that love in the old stories always arrived sideways. Not through grand gestures or carefully arranged meetings, but through small accidental moments that turned out to be perfectly placed. A stuck cartwheel. A miscounted step. An unbroken seal hidden inside a damaged crate. Lena looked at Darian Voss across the lamplight and thought that Myra was probably right about most things. The observation order ends in 3 days, she said. I know, he said. What happens after 3 days? He was quiet for a long moment. The kind of quiet that was not empty but full, the way a room feels before something important is said aloud for the first time. I would like you to stay, Darian said. Not under an order. Not as an obligation. He met her eyes directly, steadily, the amber in them warm and unguarded. I would like you to stay because this palace has better records than it has had in a generation, and because Broderick was afraid of you, Which means you are exactly the kind of person this crown has been missing. He paused once more. And because when you walked into that throne room 11 days ago, you were the only person in it who was not afraid of me. I was a little afraid, Lena admitted. You looked me in the eye anyway, he said. She held his gaze now, steady and quiet, the way she had learned to hold difficult things without flinching. I'll stay, she said simply. Darian nodded once, slowly, as if something long held had finally been set down gently. Outside the window, the Ironveil city hummed and glittered beneath a wide crescent moon, and inside the warm office with its lamp and its old letter and its two people discovering that fate had been patient for 300 years, Lena Caldwell decided that accidentally ignoring a golden mailbox had turned out to be the best mistake she had ever made. And King Darian Voss, for the first time in a very long while, was inclined to agree. End of story.